Whoa, is that a duck? Next you're gonna tell me it has a life. Oh my god. Well, we're finally here. Duck Life 4, the last game in the series I really grew up with, and by extension, the last good one. Nah, but really, as a kid, Duck Life 4 was easily my favorite game in the series, so I'm interested to see how it holds up, especially since this one made quite a few more drastic changes to the Duck Life formula than the previous installments. We're once again dealing with Wix Games, renowned for such classics as Duck Life 1, Duck Life 2, Duck Life 3, and Kill Justin Bieber. There's not much known to say about Duck Life 4's history, there's no big gimmick this time, not even a subtitle. But it's clear that Wix set out to make this the most ambitious and innovative title in the series thus far, so let's see how it turned out. Duck Life 4 was first released on February 16th, 2012 on Not Doppler, with other sites getting it a bit later. Well, there's a lot to discuss with this game, so let's just get started. The story this time is very brief, even for Duck Life. We're simply told that there's a new duck racing champion, who lives in a volcano apparently, and you gotta go beat him. Although I love that they specified that genetically modified ducks were banned after the events of Duck Life 3, with this game taking place 1 year later, giving an in-universe explanation why the ducks don't evolve anymore. That's pretty fun. Next, we get to choose from 3 different eggs, no stat bonuses this time, just different colors with randomized eyes and hairstyle. Upon making your choice, the duck will immediately hatch and you can give them a name. After a brief tutorial, we're dropped into the grasslands. Duck Life 4 is structured quite differently from its predecessors. The game is split into 6 distinct worlds, each having its own little hub area with a variety of things to do. The first 5 worlds each have a skill to train and a racing tournament to enter, and winning the tournament will unlock the next world. Each one also has its own duck shop, offering cosmetics such as hats and the newly added haircuts for your duck, along with various colored eggs which will hatch into a new duck. Yep, one of Duck Life 4's major additions, you can now have more than 1 duck at a time, up to 6 in fact. I love this idea. Building up your team, giving them different names and appearances is a lot of fun, though in practice actually having to train that many ducks is, well, we'll get to that. The training minigames are of course the main source of gameplay in the Duck Life series, and the 4th installment brings a very unique take on them. While at first it might sound weird that only 1 skill can be trained per area, each of the skills now has 3 different training games to partake in. With the 4 skills from the previous entries, and the new 5th skill, jumping, that means there's a total of 15 unique minigames, quite an improvement from last time. Well, if you count the different leagues of Duck Life 3's games, it had 12, but those were mostly just minor alterations to the same games, while all 15 of Duck Life 4's games are unique. To start training, you'll talk to the coach in each area's hub, pick which duck you want to train, and then play the skill's 3 minigames in order, with better performance of course netting more experience points. In the grassland, we predictably start off with running training. Part 1, Speed. Use the left and right arrows to fall through the holes and get as deep as you can while outrunning the scrolling screen. I like this, it's quite different but still fits for running training. With how the platforms are laid out, it feels like this minigame would have benefited from screen wrapping. That may have made it a little easier, but it would have brought additional strategy. As of now, it doesn't really feel like your fault when you lose. You'll inevitably run into a layout you just can't get through in time. Part 2, Endurance. Move left and right to avoid the falling objects. Warning signs will show where an object is about to fall, while dollar signs indicate that a coin will fall there. Very simple but effective. Going for the coins here adds a nice element of risk and reward. Part 3, Reactions. Dodge the obstacles by pressing the number key that is written on them. 1 performs a slide, while 2, 3, and 4 are jumps of increasing height. This is my favorite of the running games, and is almost just a more interesting and controlled version of the classic running training. There's no randomness aside from which numbers will appear, it's just a straight test of your reaction time. And using the number keys really makes it stand out. It works surprisingly well. Next we head over to the swamp where we can dive into some swimming training. Part 1, Reactions. Swim as far as you can, using up to jump over and down to dive under obstacles. It's the classic, you know it, you love it, and it didn't need much changing here. The swamp setting is a nice change of pace, complete with fitting obstacles like logs, tree branches, and alligators. Part 2, Endurance. The return of cave swimming. It's almost exactly the same as before, but they did get rid of the funny YouTuber thumbnail red circle when you mess up, so that's a shame I guess. Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Not much to say here. Part 3, Timing. This is the only fully original game for swimming training, and it's a pretty unique one. You gotta dive as deep as you can into the water by first holding space to turn, and then pressing space when the circles overlap. Yeah, this one's not that deep, pun ambiguously intended. You only do it once and then you're done. Maybe it would have been better if they let let you keep diving if you got a good enough score, but it's still a fun concept and a nice addition to the lineup. The swimming games in Duck Life 4 are certainly more derivative than the other skills, but considering that swimming training was easily my favorite in the first 3 installments, I don't mind whatsoever. Now we stop at the mountains for flying training. Part 1, Endurance. Move left and right to collect the seeds and keep flying, trying to fly as high as you can without falling. Now this, I like. The controls and physics feel just right, trying to stay in the air is really fun, and getting a huge boost from the purple seeds is very satisfying. Part 2, Reactions. This is a pretty neat twist on the classic flying training game. Instead of warning indicators, you'll follow the coach's flight path to dodge the oncoming cliffs. There are a lot more places the cliffs can appear than before, but following the coach's path will keep you in the clear. Part 3, Accuracy. Use the mouse to aim the cannon and try to shoot your duck to the center of the target. There are 3 levels to this one, each more challenging than the last. It's the same every time, so I wish it had more variety, like by having more layouts or randomizing the position of the targets somehow. Still, it's a unique and enjoyable minigame that fits flying training very well. Flying training in the first 3 games was essentially just iterating the same game over and over, so it was nice to finally get some new games themed around flying. Quite a nice selection here. Then we venture out to the glacier for climbing training. Part 1, Speed. Keep climbing the ladders to stay on screen for as long as you can. Here we have essentially the inverse of running training's Part 1. Instead of falling down holes, you climb up ladders. This one's alright. The climbing is a little finicky, the ladder looks more like a spine that was seemingly drawn in about 10 seconds, but it's fairly satisfying and interesting to play. Part 2, Risk. Now this is a unique one. You've got a minute to climb as high as you can up the mountain, but sometimes an avalanche will come down, preceded by a warning sign. But along the climb, there are alcoves where you can stop to avoid them. The time limit is what really makes this one. You want to be climbing as much as you can to get the best score, but you need to decide when to stop to avoid the avalanches. It's a classic game of risk and reward. What more can I say? It's a great concept executed really well. Part 3, Reactions. Yeah, this is literally just the climbing training game from the previous installments. That's fine, it's nice to see some familiar classics mixed in with the new, but man, has this particular minigame never changed throughout the series or what? Finally, we head into the city for the all-new jumping training. While it is pretty situational in the races, I think this was a great choice for a 5th skill. There's a lot of interesting concepts you can get out of jumping. Part 1, Endurance. Move and jump to avoid being crushed by the falling blocks as they fill the screen. You start out with a floor, but once the boxes start stacking up, the screen follows and you have to be more careful. Pretty clever way to ramp up the difficulty the longer you last. I like this one. It's not the best, like sometimes you're just waiting around for a while and other times a block crushes you without much warning, but it's not bad. Whenever people say there should be a Tetris stage in Smash Bros, this is pretty much what I imagine. Part 2, Balance. Jump on the pogo stick and try not to fall into the increasingly wide holes, using left and right to move and up to jump higher. The controls here are really finicky. The movement is very sensitive, but if you get the hang of it, it can be really satisfying to jump those wide gaps. But yeah, this one certainly could have done with being easier to control. Part 3, Skill. Follow the instructions to perform the most tricks on the trampoline as you can before time runs out. You're shown the position to be when you start the bounce and when you end the bounce, as well as the direction you have to turn to get there. And for each trick you do correctly, more time is added to the clock. Sounds a bit confusing at first, but once you get it, it's great. This is easily one of my favorites. It's a very unique concept, definitely one of the more complex ones, and it's just really fun and satisfying to play. As jumping is a new skill to the series, of course its training games feel the most unique. They can be a little finicky, but a lot of fun. And those were all of the training minigames Duck Life 4 has to offer. And what a huge step up from the previous installments. Having 3 games per skill adds a ton of much appreciated variety, and the new minigames are, in general, really fun. While the previous installments were mostly iterating on the same concepts, these minigames actually feel fresh and unique. Well, despite the few that are from the previous games, but that's only like 3 out of the 15. Without question, the best selection of training games the series has seen thus far. The other staple of the series, the races, are handled differently here as well. Each of the hub worlds has a waddling of different ducks for you to talk to, each of whom will challenge you to a race. Most of these races are just for prize money, but one duck in each area will award you a ticket for the tournament, so you have to beat them before being able to enter. Also note that a few of these ducks have skill requirements in order to challenge them, such as needing to have above a certain level in a specific skill, or that one duck who won't race you unless your duck has 0 flying skill. His race doesn't have any flying, he just doesn't like people who are better than him. Screw this guy, by the way. I didn't feel like training a whole new duck for just one race, so this is still the only one I never did. The tournaments are a series of 3 races played back to back. You decide which of your ducks will participate in each of the 3 races, and if you use the same game one multiple times, they can get tired and become slower, incentivizing you to build up a team. You can even give your team a name, which is a fun little touch. The randomly generated ones can be pretty funny too. You earn points depending on what place you get in each race, so you don't necessarily need to get first in all three. As long as you do better than the other teams, you win the tournament and can move on to the next world. I really like this change to the setup. Talking to other ducks on the overworld to race them and then entering into a tournament after earning a ticket, it all feels more natural than the way it was previously done. The hub areas are simple, but they're really nice and implemented very well. They fit perfectly with duck life. And they fulfill the same roles as the basic main screens from the previous game, such as having the seed dispenser and the duck shop. It's a very logical next step. Now, as for the races themselves, I'm sure you could guess not much has changed. It's still all down to your duck's stats, with no player controller influence. There are some fairly cool new set pieces, like these slopes the ducks slide down, and of course the new jumping skill comes into play in the late game, which is fun to see. They're nothing particularly special, but the races are overall pretty good. As for the presentational side, I really like Duck Life 4's visuals. It strikes the perfect balance between being a bit more detailed than the first three games, while still maintaining their unique simplistic charm. The graphics are familiar and certainly still look like Duck Life, but seem a bit more refined. It's very nice. And the variety of worlds you visit each feel distinct and memorable. Now, Duck Life 4's soundtrack is surprisingly amazing. Each of the hub areas and each skill's training games have their own unique musical themes. This soundtrack has so much variety, and each of the tracks fit where they're used perfectly. There's not a single track I don't like, they're all fantastic. Even the victory jingle is endearingly overly triumphant. And I love how they continue to incorporate the main melodies of Duck Life 1 and 2 into different tracks. It's very fun to hear. Too many highlights to name, but I have to give a special shout out to the swimming training theme. It's such a vibe and has always been my favorite. I'm usually not the best at remembering exact events from my childhood, but I have a very specific memory related to this part of the game. This was in about 4th or 5th grade, and our school went on a field trip to the Museum of Natural History. While there, this was the day I learned that the sun is gonna explode in 4 billion years. And for some reason, that really affected me. So I got home, booted up Duck Life 4, played swimming training, and tried to wrap my little brain around the ultimate fate of our galaxy. I just thought you'd find that interesting. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, in my Duck Life reviews, I usually have a section here talking about the game's glitchiness and stuff, so here's that. Duck Life 4 was doing really great, but it started getting buggy on me towards the late game, when I got to the city. It started with some minor ones, like the boxes in the first jumping game sometimes staying on screen, and my ducks being able to level up beyond 150, which I'm pretty sure is a glitch. It definitely doesn't look right. And then after playing the arcade you get after beating the game, my Swift file literally broke. Whenever I try to open it, it just crashes. I thought this might be a problem with my Flash player or something, but nope, there are forum posts from even back when the game was new about this exact thing. I have no idea how this wasn't caught. That's pretty lame, especially since I didn't really encounter any other glitches besides the ones I mentioned. And while we're being negative, in my opinion, Duck Life 4's biggest flaw is this. Leveling up your skills just takes forever. It feels much slower than the first 3 games, and after a while training starts to feel a bit tedious. And this problem is multiplied even further based on how many different ducks you decide to train. Here's the thing, Duck Life 4 simultaneously encourages and discourages you to train multiple ducks. Tournaments have 3 slots for ducks, and if you use the same one they will get tired and perform worse, but in the end you're required to have a single duck with maximum levels and everything to enter the final race. So you could easily train a singular duck to the max in every skill, never even using the other 5 slots in your team, and it would take less time than bothering with multiple. I appreciate that they tried to give you an incentive to use multiple ducks, but it didn't really work. I love the idea of building up my duck squad to take on the world, but in practice, it's kinda pointless. Eventually, I started training just 1 duck because training multiple felt like a waste of time. I'd be lying if I said this didn't bring the game down a little bit. The training minigames are the best and most varied they've been yet, but even they start to feel like a grind due to how long it takes to increase your levels. If they wanted to compel you to use many different ducks, if anything, they should have made leveling faster, right? Though I kind of do get why this was done, to make the game feel more substantial and, well, just longer. And they definitely succeeded on that front. Duck Life 4 is much longer than its predecessors. Those could all be beaten in under an hour, while this one took me about 4.5 hours. And that really isn't a bad thing. While the slow leveling up certainly contributes to the length, there's just a lot more to do in Duck Life 4, so it makes sense for it to be lengthier than the previous ones. The 6th and final world of Duck Life 4 is the volcano. It's very different from the others as it has no skill to train nor tournament to enter. We just have some ducks to race, each of whom will give us a key. These are some of the most intense and dynamic races, really putting all of your duck skills to the test. The only other thing here is this mystery box locked by 3 color chains that perfectly match the keys that the 3 ducks just gave us. Wow, how convenient. Opening the box reveals a detonator, which we immediately decide to activate, causing the volcano to erupt. And out comes, what's this guy called again? I think he's just the fire duck, right? Wait, nicknamed by some of the fanbase as Frank? I have no idea where that came from, but I'm going with it. So Frank is mad at us for blowing up his volcano and challenges us to a race. After going back to grind our levels up to the max to reach the requirement, the coach duck explains that Frank is a super crazy magic fire duck, so our duck is going to need some help to be able to win. In other words, we can actually control our duck during the final race, using the arrow keys to move and up to jump. You gotta carefully dodge falling lava from the ceiling and hop over lava pits to reach the flag before Frank does. This completely spits in the face of what Duck Life stands for, and I love it. Being able to directly control your duck during a race is super weird, but just for the final race, to make it actually feel like a challenge, I think that's a great idea. Too bad that as a final boss, this is kinda underwhelming. Frank is a bit too slow, and the race is way too short. It just needed to be a bit longer with a few more unique obstacles to make it truly feel like a worthy finale. Though the game over screen if you touch lava is really funny, especially with that stupid laughing chipmunk sound, which also plays whenever you lose a race. That's great. The race itself should have been a little longer and more interesting, but it's a really great idea and a good finale. The final races being more player involved just makes a lot of sense, and this was a great improvement after the Domokun thing last game introduced the idea. Reaching the finish line after some intense dodging and jumping, you're greeted by the amusing celebratory text, "You beat the damn champion!" After fiddling with the broken victory screen for a while, your duck is crowned the new champion of duck racing and receives the typical rewards, including the crown and the arcade machine to play all the different training minigames for a high score.
If it didn't break the game.
But you also receive a mysterious egg with a control panel on its side. The egg will hatch into a new duck which you're allowed to freely customize the appearance of. Kinda pointless since you already beat the game and it's missing some of the more unique color patterns, but that's a pretty neat reward. And that's Duck Life 4. An amazing Duck Life game held back a tiny bit by some slow grinding and a few egregious glitches that somehow went under the radar. If it weren't for those few small issues, this would basically be the perfect Duck Life game. Every aspect of Duck Life 4 feels like a huge step up from its predecessors. The training minigames are much more fun and varied, the new structure with the hub areas and tournaments works incredibly well, and the graphics and music are better than ever. The first 3 games are certainly more pick up and play, being able to blaze through them in under an hour, but Duck Life 4, despite and perhaps because of its slower pace, feels much more like a proper adventure. This game took a risk, and although it's not perfect, it's certainly paid off. Duck Life 4 is the best game in the series thus far. It simply takes the core concept of Duck Life and pushes it further than ever before, creating a much more fleshed out experience while still maintaining what makes the series so fun. All in all, a truly fantastic sequel. And now that I've established how great this game is, let's see if they screwed it up again for the mobile and Steam release. Well, here we are again. Duck Life 4 received a remake? Remastered thing on mobile devices and much later on Steam. We have another Run 3 mobile situation here where the mobile version removes the number from the name and is just the series title. What, did they not want players to think, oh, I gotta play Duck Life 1 through 3 first to understand the story? Oddly enough though, while I was writing this, the Steam version was updated and is now actually called Duck Life 4. In fact, all of the later games are also now listed with a number along with their original subtitle. I think for the later games it's pretty redundant, like they each already had a subtitle, why do you also need the number? But for 4, it should have just been called that from the start. Regardless, I'll refer to this version as Duck Life Unity from now on to differentiate from the Flash original. This version of the game has quite a complicated history. It was first released on mobile devices on March 8th, 2013 as a somewhat modified remake of the original Flash version. But later, in 2017, it received an update that brought several more changes. And then on November 26, 2020, that version was released on Steam. It also serves as the basis for an HTML5 web version of the game, and yeah, it's just too much. There are tons of minute differences between the 3 major varieties of Duck Life Unity over time, but I'm gonna focus my attention here on the current Steam and mobile versions. Alright, let's boot it up and oh, when the game was updated to add the 4 to the title, it deleted my save file. That's fun. A huge difference right out the gate is that instead of choosing your starter duck from 3 different eggs, you get to create your first duck, choosing from a variety of colors, eyes, hairstyles, and the newly added tattoos, patterns that can have a separate color. It's funny that fully customizing a duck was considered a reward for beating the game in the original, but now it's just something you can do for every single duck, and with many more options as well. The duck shop also has lots of new costumes in addition to hats, giving even more cosmetic options. So yeah, the customization is an inarguable improvement from the original. We might as well start by addressing the elephant in the room, the new graphics. The visuals have been completely overhauled and redone, and I kinda just don't get why. Like, there was really nothing wrong with the original game's visuals. The new graphics are okay, like they're technically more detailed, but they're such a huge departure from the original that it barely feels like the same game anymore. It is 100% just a matter of opinion which style you prefer. I definitely prefer the old one, though it's hard to tell how much of that preference is rooted in nostalgia, but credit where credit's due, some parts of the new version actually look quite good. I particularly like the city's new look with its nice purple hue, and some areas in the original that appeared way too simplistic are now more detailed. Again, I'm not the biggest fan, but I'm fine with it. Now, the much worse offender here is the new music. The title theme, running training, climbing training, and race theme have all been replaced with new compositions. And somehow all 4 of them are worse. That's almost impressive. I'm not a big fan of the more, I don't know, childish style they go for with this new music. They replaced the original cool-sounding title screen music with this thing filled with children laughing and kazoos. I feel like I'm being talked down to. For Christ's sake, I'm a grown adult and I want to play my funny, silly duck game without being patronized! Very similar thing goes for the running, training, and race theme, so, you know, I'm thrilled about that. And the new climbing theme is, on its own, not terrible, but it sounds like generic happy stock music. It doesn't fit the glacier at all. I prefer the intense sounding original. On a more positive note, they've created new themes for the duck shop and tournament lobby where the original just reused the title theme. And I actually really like the tournament lobby music. It's a great remix of the classic Duck Life themes. No goofy children noises or kazoos to be heard whatsoever. Why couldn't the rest of them be like that? So yeah, apart from that one, Duck Life Unity's soundtrack is a total downgrade in my ears. It sucks, as the soundtrack was always one of my favorite parts of Duck Life 4, and while I wouldn't say it's ruined, it is certainly not as good. And even more so than the graphics, it just leaves me wondering why. This literally took more effort than just reusing the original soundtrack. Why even bother fixing what wasn't broken? And while we're on about stupid audio changes, for some reason they replaced the classic Duck Life coin sound effect with basically a knockoff of the Mario coin sound. At least they didn't replace the swimming training theme. We would have had a real big problem in that case. Now on to gameplay differences. Finally, right? First, I'm happy to report that, unlike the Steam version of RetroPack, Unity actually retains all of the keyboard controls from the Flash original. And in general, it feels much better to control than RetroPack did, though definitely not as good as the original. The training games in Unity often feel slower and easier, and just not quite as satisfying as before. One of the most notable changes is that you're now able to play a skills training minigames freely in any order, rather than having to play them sequentially. I'm okay with this change. It's nice to be allowed to play whatever you want. If you want to get all of your jumping skill from the pogo stick game, be my guest. Another interesting addition is the boost button in races. Tap this button to give your duck an immediate burst of speed, at the cost of a good chunk of their energy meter. And it can only be used 3 times per race, so don't try to spam it. I actually kind of like the idea of Duck Life having a boost button. It gives you something to do during the races, strategically thinking about when's the best time to use it. Hey, the Chow Garden had it, one of Duck Life's biggest inspirations. However, perhaps they shouldn't have retrofitted it into Duck Life 4, as the races weren't really designed around it. You can often boost at the last second and steal the win. It kind of feels like cheating. They've also removed the skill requirements for races, and while some of these I was okay with, I'm sure they changed this just because Wix got a lot of complaints about that duck in the glacier who hates flying. One actually great change is that leveling up your duck's skills is now faster. This helps a lot with keeping the game from feeling too grindy, which was my least favorite aspect of the original, so of course I'm happy with this. The final race against Frank has a very different layout, is easier, and also longer, so I guess that's another improvement. After becoming the champion, instead of the custom egg, you now gain the ability to train your skills up to level 250. This is a fun little bonus, and it gives you more of a reason to use the training arcade, which, hey, another fun little bonus, doesn't break the game anymore. There are plenty more small differences I could go over, even between variations of Duck Life Unity itself, but I'd probably be here all day. It goes without saying that I have very mixed feelings towards Duck Life Unity. It brought a lot of changes to one of my most nostalgic Flash games. Some I like, some I don't, and a lot that are just in the middle. I'm not a big fan of the new graphics, and especially the replaced music, but it also kind of fixed my biggest problem with the original game. And it did have some nice ideas that I see potential in, like better customization, playing the training games in any order, and the boost button. Obviously, I still prefer the Flash version by a long shot, but this was really not as bad as I expected it to be. I thought I'd be ripping this to shreds, getting unreasonably mad about the funny Duck Baby game again like with RetroPack. But the main difference is that Duck Life Unity actually functions. Yeah, RetroPack on Steam really lowered my expectations for this one. Overall, it's certainly not my preferred way to play Duck Life 4, but it's not necessarily a bad one either. It's $3.99 on Steam, and while I don't recommend it if you can play the original Flash version, I also don't really advise steering clear of it at all costs. Again, big step up from RetroPack. So yeah, Duck Life 4 sure is a game. Revisiting it now, I noticed quite a few more imperfections than I did as a kid, but despite all that, it still remains my personal favorite Duck Life game. As of right now anyway, but I'll definitely have to take a look at the future installments eventually. I'm interested to see what the newer Duck Life games have to offer. I've only played a tiny bit of Battle and Adventure, none of Space, and a 9th game is on the horizon too. But wait, before that, isn't there one more on Flash? Oh yeah, there was. I wonder how they tried to follow up on such an ambitious Duck Life game as 4. What's that? Oh, I've just been informed. The answer is, they didn't.